Why you praying? You my don't act like that.
The old, the old negativity or the old person I was back in the day, whether it be, old habits or, just the bull that I used to put myself in all the time.
Chris Brown has been making waves in the music world since he was just 15 years old. But despite his fame and success, his life has been anything but smooth sailing, filled with one trouble after another, from his obsession with gang culture to numerous run-ins with the law that even landed him behind bars. These issues have clouded people's view of him as the next Michael Jackson. Let's dive into his journey.
I mean, someone like Chris Brown he got a lot to lose.
I mean, but Chris Brown ain't in it. He just affiliated. He not in the streets putting in no work.
Chris Brown was born in 1989 in Tappahannock, Virginia, a place known for its above-average crime rate. Interestingly, Chris wasn't really exposed to gangs and their culture during his early years. In fact, he found success at an age when many might have been drawn into such activities. His big break came when talent scouts happened to visit a gas station owned by his father. Within months, Chris was recording demos in New York and soon signed with Jive Records. Even back then, his talent was undeniable, and many saw him as a potential successor to Michael Jackson, thanks to his impressive singing and dancing skills. Chris was also deeply into hip-hop culture, but his label had other plans. They persuaded him to steer clear of rapping, wanting to market him strictly as an R&B artist. Not only did he have to abandon rapping, but he also had to adopt a squeaky clean image, which meant letting go of his affinity for hip-hop. Despite this, his self-titled debut album in 2005 was a massive hit, entering the Billboard 200 at number 2 and producing hits like Run It and Gimme That. By 2007, Chris was opening for Beyoncé on tour, making appearances on shows like MTV's My Super Sweet 16 Inches, renamed Chris Brown My Super 18 Inches for his episode, and releasing his second album, Exclusive. This album included smash hits like Kiss Kiss and Wall to Wall, showcasing his ability to blend R&B with the auto-tuned pop-leaning hip-hop of the time. His breakout moment, however, came at the 2007 MTV Video Music Awards, where he delivered a show-stopping performance that included a brief interlude of Michael Jackson's Billie Jean. The performance even featured a cameo from Rihanna, who joined him on stage for her hit Umbrella. Their chemistry was undeniable, though they kept their relationship mostly under wraps. However, this love story took a dark turn a year and a half later. The night before the 2009 Grammy Awards, a brutal argument broke out between Chris and Rihanna in his rented Lamborghini. The fight began when Rihanna discovered a text message from a woman Chris had been involved with. According to the police report, Chris hit Rihanna's head against the car window, punched and choked her, bit her ear, and even threatened to K-word her. Both were set to perform at the Grammys the next day, but understandably canceled. The photo of Rihanna's battered face became unavoidable in the media, and Chris's once pristine public image was shattered overnight.
Endorsement deals, a fashion star. And then one night, her equally famous boyfriend, Chris Brown, beat her so badly, the whole world was shocked to discover there was a secret life.
After the incident, Chris says he was so distraught that he considered and didn't leave his house for 3 months. At a hearing in March 2009, he expressed deep remorse, saying, "Words cannot begin to express how sorry and saddened I am over what transpired."
And like I said, I'm really sorry for what went down and what happened.
3 months later, he pled guilty to felony assault, resulting in a plea deal that included 5 years of probation, 1,400 hours of community service, and a domestic program. A report obtained by CNN during his sentencing revealed 2 previous incidents of domestic between Chris and Rihanna, one in Europe and another in Barbados. During this difficult period, Rihanna made several appearances at Chris's hearings. She later said, "I felt like he made that mistake because he needed help. Initially, it seemed like Chris was on a swift path to redemption." At his first probation hearing, the judge praised him for his community service and counseling efforts and allowed him to travel overseas for concerts. His subsequent hearings were also positive, and eventually, the judge lifted the restraining order preventing him from contacting Rihanna. They even began seeing each other off and on again during this time, but things started getting pretty wild for Chris Brown, with his temper tantrums and angry outbursts becoming a significant part of his public image. In March 2011, during an appearance on Good Morning America, he lost his cool big time. Host Robin Roberts kept asking him about the Rihanna incident, and Chris wasn't having it. He stormed off to his dressing room, punched a window until it cracked, and then strutted out into the street shirtless.
Staff called security because they heard loud noises coming from Brown's dressing room. A window in Brown's dressing room was smashed, and that caused shattered glass to fall onto the street below in Times Square.
And all this happened when he was supposed to be promoting his album Fame, which he said stood for both Forgiving All My Enemies and Fans Are My Everything. Despite the drama, the album was a hit and even won the 2012 Grammy for Best R&B Album. Just a few months later, in June 2012, things escalated when Chris and his crew got into a nasty brawl with Drake and his entourage at a New York club. The whole thing reportedly kicked off after Chris sent Drake a bottle of champagne as a peace offering. Drake, who had been romantically linked with Rihanna, supposedly sent back a note that read, "I'm effing the love of your life," which obviously didn't sit well with Chris. The fight left several people injured and the club in chaos.
I think I caught a bottle coming by, like going this way, and then a whole bunch of bottles coming back to this way.
Fast forward to January 2013, Chris was back in the headlines, this time accused of punching and threatening to shoot singer Frank Ocean at a Los Angeles recording studio. Just a month later, Chris totaled his Porsche after being chased by paparazzi. It didn't stop there. He was also accused of punching a woman at a nightclub. Despite these accusations, no charges were filed. The roller coaster continued in October 2013 when Chris and his bodyguard were accused of a man in Washington, D.C. after the man photobombed a picture Chris was taking with a fan. Chris allegedly punched the guy in the face and ended up spending the night in jail. Shortly after, he checked into rehab, but his stay was cut short after he reportedly smashed his mom's car window following a therapy session. Chris moved to another rehab facility where he seemed to be doing better after they switched his medication. It was during this time that he was diagnosed with bipolar II disorder, which is characterized by depressive and hypomanic episodes. In March 2014, things took another turn when he was sent to jail for violating his probation after being kicked out of rehab. Chris claimed it was a setup, but he was ordered to serve 131 days in county jail.
He's got over 230 days, some odd days credit on a 365, and generally the sheriff is releasing on a lot less than that. But it's up to the sheriff, obviously.
To avoid trouble with other inmates, he spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. On June 2nd, 2014, Chris got an early release. He kissed the ground outside the jail and made a beeline for Burger King. Later on, Chris Brown would look back on his time in prison and talk about how much it changed him. He said he was working on being more mature, leaving behind, and how therapy had really helped him.
It just was a humbling experience for me to become a man and mature.
Do you believe in therapy? Do you think it works?
Absolutely, I believe in therapy. I see my therapist twice a week. You know, it's amazing.
However, despite his best intentions, his run-ins with the law just kept getting worse. But there was one thing that stood out about Chris: his obsession with gangs. In 2013, Chris found himself in a pretty scary situation at a Hollywood nightclub. A guy who claimed to be a member of the Crips started threatening him. This guy hurled a bunch of expletives at Chris and asked if his Lamborghini was bulletproof, making it clear he was a full-fledged gang member. Chris, knowing the dangers of escalating the situation, chose to keep his cool and not engage. He later told TMZ, "It's LA, brother. You just gotta keep your head down and keep walking."
Yo, scary ass. Is that bulletproof? Is that bulletproof? I'm a Crip. Hell yeah, I'm bulletproof.
Despite these threats, Chris tried to use his influence for good. In June of that year, he released a video for his song Don't Think They Know, which carried a strong message against gang violence. The video opens with the words, "Every 2 hours in America today, a child dies of a gunshot wound, and unity is what we're afraid of, so fear is insanity. Let's love each other." The video, shot in black and white with flashes of red and blue to represent the Crips and Bloods, aimed to highlight the harsh realities of gang violence. Chris explained, "When I did the video, I wanted to do kinda like the Boys in the Hood theme, also bringing an aspect of the side of the world that people never really talk about anymore. Gun or stuff that we deal with in our neighborhood or community that we could just stop." This message was powerful and appreciated considering Chris's huge platform and influence. But a few months later, Chris did something that seemed to contradict his anti-violence stance. In August 2013, while in Hawaii, he spray painted some graffiti that read Fruits Piru, a reference to the Fruittown Piru gang, which is affiliated with the Bloods. This action raised a lot of eyebrows and led to criticism. The following year, at the BET Awards, Chris once again appeared to show support for the Bloods. At an after-party, he was seen flashing gang signs. This move sparked even more backlash. People found it puzzling that Chris, who grew up in Virginia far from the gang culture of LA, decided to embrace these gangs in his mid-20s, especially after working hard to clean up his image following the Rihanna incident. In an interview with Vlad TV, rapper and Crips member Trey D expressed his bewilderment over Chris Brown and others joining gangs after achieving success. Idzerhar remarked, "It has to either be a psychological defect where you don't want to enjoy your life and wealth and, ride around on boats." He continued, "I see it as a peer pressure aspect. Is this what you really want for yourself, or do you feel this is the only way you'll be secure in certain areas? So are you buying into it for protection? That's the only logical conclusion I can come to."
Why would you want to be rich and start fighting people? I mean, it makes no sense to me. The peer pressure aspect is that, is this what you really want for yourself, or do you feel that this is the only way you'll be secure in certain areas?
Chris Brown's public display of gang signs led many to believe he had joined the Bloods. Normally, flashing gang signs without being a member would be unwise and likely provoke a response. However, a Bloods member clarified that while Chris Brown wasn't officially a member, they didn't mind him using the signs. This gang member provided 4 specific reasons why Chris Brown was permitted to make these gestures. He's hired several of them to work for him, giving their Compton community an economic boost. Chris came to the hood and hangs out with them. He shot a music video in the neighborhood and even included some of them in the video, and he donated 1,000 pairs of new shoes to Compton kids. While it's easy to criticize Chris Brown, these actions show he cares about people in poorer neighborhoods in LA, which is more than can be said for many other celebrities living there. But does this mean he needs to rep the gang as well? The idea that Chris Brown might be using the Bloods for protection is intriguing. On the surface, it makes some sense, but Charlemagne the God has argued that artists who do this are essentially being extorted. In another Vlad TV interview, he said, "You're really paying for protection when you can just pay for protection in the legal way. Why put yourself in the mix of that?" This raises questions about why Chris Brown is so obsessed with gangs.
Chris Brown do it.
It makes no sense. Now you just out here getting extorted. You in LA getting extorted. Let's call it what it is. Like, a lot of these guys are just out in LA getting extorted. That's it.
Interestingly, Chris Brown isn't the only one who seems to have fallen into this pattern. Rapper Bow Wow has faced similar criticism. Born in 1989 and 1987 respectively, Chris Brown and Bow Wow's earliest memories of hip-hop coincide with the golden age of hip-hop and the height of gangsta rap. Vlad pointed out that they grew up on Death Row, Snoop, and the Dogg Pound and have sort of been enamored with that gang culture because of the music. Charlemagne the God sees this as a naive viewpoint, saying, "Salute to all the real Bloods and Crips out there who probably had no other choice because it was a thing in their community or family. But these guys who have totally other options, who didn't grow up around that at all. You're entertainers." Bow Wows to Chris Brown's. Stop it.
Well, if I was them, I'd be upset. I'd be like, yo, y'all representing us wrong. Stop it. Chris Brown, stop doing that on social media. Bow Wow, stop that. Stop misrepresenting us.
In September 2014, Chris Brown sat down with Sway for an interview where the topic of potential gang affiliations came up. Chris Brown brushed it off, saying that it's just part of the territory when you're living in LA and involved in the hip-hop industry. He explained, "When you're in LA and you're around people, you meet everybody. You meet Crips, you meet Bloods, especially in this industry that I'm in. I'm not in the country world. I'm not in the all-the-way pop world. When you're in hip-hop, all of that meshes." Fast forward 2 years to 2016, and Chris was back in the spotlight for a different reason. This time, it was for a bizarre Instagram rant where he called out people for pretending to be part of gangs. A bit ironic considering he had been accused of the same thing. In his now deleted post, he vented, "So many fake gang members these days. They get in the industry and the next thing you know, they got a blue rag or a red rag. Ain't been through nothing. Out of town, dudes me with this stuff. You not a Blood or a Crip just because you know a dude from that hood and you bought a blue or red rag from the dollar store. Stop faking the funk. Y'all not bout that." Blue Bloods and Red Crips is what I'ma call you imposters. With all this drama and controversy, it's easy to forget that Chris Brown has had an incredibly successful music career. He's sold over 140 million records worldwide, making him one of the world's best-selling music artists. He has a dedicated fan base and is one of the highest-grossing African-American touring artists of all time. Brown holds the record for the most Billboard Hot 100 entries of any male singer in history, the most top 40 hits of any R&B singer in history, the most RIAA gold-certified singles of any male singer in history, and the most RIAA multi-platinum singles of any male singer in history. In 2019, Billboard named him the third most successful artist of the 2010s decade in R&B and hip-hop music, right behind Drake and Rihanna. He's won 202 awards from 513 nominations and even pursued an acting career, appearing in films like Stomp the Yard, This Christmas, Takers, Think Like a Man, and Battle of the Year. But despite all these accomplishments, Chris Brown hasn't quite hit the astronomical heights that many envisioned for him when he burst onto the scene at just 15 years old. He hasn't become the next Michael Jackson, and none of his albums have reached the iconic status of Thriller or Off the Wall. There's no shame in that. Michael Jackson set an almost impossibly high bar. But fellow artist Akon believes that Chris Brown had the potential to reach those heights. In a 2022 interview, Akon said, "In this day and age, the only person, in my opinion, that could have achieved just as great of a legacy as Michael Jackson would have been Chris Brown. I just believe that Chris Brown wasn't surrounded by the circle of creative people that Mike was surrounded by, because Chris got the talent. He just needed the direction."
In this day and age, the only person, in my opinion, that could have achieved just as great as a legacy as Mike, to me, would have been Chris Brown.
Akon went on to imagine what Chris Brown's career could have looked like if he had Michael Jackson's team behind him. So imagine if Chris had Mike's team. Just imagine that. But Chris, he got Bloods around him. He got little gangbangers around him. He don't have the guidance. He's smart, but he's smart in what this generation attracts.
Imagine if Chris had Mike's team.
Right.
Just imagine that. It would be something different.
And that's big.
But Chris is healthy, like he got Bloods around him.
Even diehard Chris Brown fans might agree that he hasn't fully realized his potential. Some might argue that the Rihanna incident played a role in this, and there's definitely a case to be made that it helped propel her career while holding his back. But it's also true that it's hard to become the next Michael Jackson when you're heavily gang affiliated and throwing up gang signs.